I'm going to start by introducing our very exciting and important panelists. Today, Gabriel is the author of Harvesting Freedom, The Life of a Migrant Worker in Canada. If you haven't already, you should definitely go and get this book. It is a memoir that disrupts silences in the history of Canada's food and labor and agricultural markets. He has been and continues to be a leading voice in migrant workers' justice advocacy work with organizations like Justicia in Ontario. And today he's going to be talking to us and with us about how, first of all, some of his experiences as a temporary foreign worker under the Seasonal Agricultural Work Program, and also how he came to be an important voice for the advocacy work protecting the rights of temporary foreign workers. So thank you so much, Gabriel, for being with us. Is there anything you'd like to add to my introduction of you?
No, I think it's pretty complete. I'm satisfied with it.
Okay, yeah, great. We also have with us Desmond Cole, who is a journalist, author, educator, and activist based in Toronto. His work focuses on struggles against state violence, especially policing. Desmond's work is in print, video, live radio, and podcasts, and has been featured in publications across Canada. His 2020 debut book, The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power, is a bestseller and winner of the Toronto Book Award. Desmond currently works as a journalist at the online publication The Breach and teaches a journalism course at the University of Toronto. In 2024, he was awarded an honorary doctorate from Ontario Tech University for his work to combat anti-Black racism. Desmond, is there anything else you'd like to add to your bio?
Not at all. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for being here. So I'm going to this today is going to be a discussion amongst really the two of you and with me as well. But first I would like to invite Gabriel. Uh, Either you can do, I really love the poem at the beginning of your book, and I invite you to read that poem, I Am Many Things, and or allow me to read it to the audience.
Oh, thank you. I would be really happy with that. Would you be willing to do it?
Yes, I'm more than happy to read. So this is a poem by Gabriel, and it is called I Am Many Things. It goes, I am many things in Canada. A god, for my surname, Allahdua, a Muslim name for God, from my ancestor on my father's side, an indentured worker from India. An angel, for my given name, the angel Gabriel from Christianity, a religion imposed on my ancestors. Colonization. They've made me an angel because my labor is used to create somebody else's heaven. A slave, like my mother's ancestors, exploited for my labor far away from home. Half human, denied basic human rights, second class under Canadian law. A lab rat. In a grand employment experiment, everything that is being introduced into the Canadian workplace, short-term, contract, flexible employment, has been tried on us for 57 years. What they try on migrant farm workers, they'll try on you next. Thank you for letting me share that, Gabriel. Would you like to tell us what inspired you to write this, how you came to these words, and how they speak to your experience?
Yeah, thank you. Special greetings to each and everyone. Thanks for investing your time with us today. I know the weather in Toronto and maybe the whole of Ontario is really challenging. And to choose to spend your time with us today is really, I really appreciate that. Yeah, in terms of the poem there, I discovered that many things. It's simply because in my home country, Canada have been really, really, really nice to me in my home country. And imagine. And when I got the opportunity, when I was at the lowest point in my life, I got the opportunity to come to Canada to earn my livelihood. If in my home country, Canada have been so nice to me, can you imagine now that I'm getting the opportunity to be in Canada, how much more, even better things I'm expecting? Only to find out, only to find out that my living and working conditions are extremely, extremely difficult, very challenging. So the gap, there was a huge gap between my expectation and my reality. And these are the things that forced me to this is really the disappointment that I experienced in Canada. That is what really forced me to reflect on my life and my experience in Canada. And also I discovered too things like when I came across the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they call it on you, they call it on me to do 94 things to make right those injustices. That is very loud. That's a loud statement. Other things is like I get it to discover that America has a big mouth and Canada is quiet on the world stage. And I was forced to think about something that is commonly said in my culture. Which one is better? To live with a devil that you know, or to live with an angel that you don't know? We know Donald Trump is a devil, but we know where he stands. But Canada on the world stage is an angel. But quietly, they have policies, unjust policies that really perpetuate difficult working and living conditions. These are some of the things that really force me. And other things too would be the 5 Ds I learned in Canada. The 5 Ds. Some Canadians are very good at denying these things existing. Deny. Some like to downplay it. Oh, it's not as bad. Deflect the conversation, derail the conversation, delay the these are things that really push me to think about those things. And even just equally important or just as loud is Canada has a culture of silence. Culture of silence. How can we change things if we don't talk about it? Culture of silence. And these are some of the key things that really push me to write that poem and even publish the book. And another powerful thing is in my home country, they say no news is good news. No news is good news. We don't know anything bad about Canada. When I got the opportunity to come to Canada, I thought I was coming to the perfect place. Everything must be right because no news is good news. Only to find out Canada has a culture of silence. And because of unjust laws, unjust policies, migrant workers are forced to be quiet. So, so we interpret that in our culture as no news is good news, but only to find out it's because of unjust laws, unjust policies. And even this book there, they said that's the first time a migrant worker has published his story in almost 60 years. So is no news good news? No. No news in Canada is because of unjust laws. No news in Canada is because of just policy. And for me, to live it, to work in it, to sleep in it, to breathe it, to experience it, I had to do something.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I would pose the same question to you, Desmond, in terms of how do you come to the words that you write, the workings that you do, and also speak to that culture of silence and the potential consequences of breaking silence around unjust injustices in Canada. Specifically, I know you've worked on anti-Black racism in Canada.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Gabriel, thank you for your work and for breaking those silences that you're talking about. Um, I came to this work as the child of immigrants from Sierra Leone in West Africa, having a very privileged life here in Canada, I would say, relatively speaking. Growing up in a household where we had enough to eat, where I was able to go to a nice elementary school and a nice high school. And I had friends in my life growing up. and really taking Canada for granted because I was born here and this is the only country that I've known. And all of that changed when I dropped out of university. I was accepted to Queen's and I took that opportunity, but after 2 years, I really felt like I couldn't continue at school. I didn't know why I was there, and I dropped out. And I was in Kingston, but I ended up going back home to Oshawa, where I grew up for a while, and then ended up in Toronto. And that's where life really changed for me because suddenly I found myself in a city where I had no job, I had no money, I had no permanent place to live. I was couch surfing with friends. I ended up in the Toronto shelter system. And I started to understand, even as a young person who wants to work and who has some education and who's, driven to go to work, how hard it really is to make your way and to make a living. And so it's through a drop-in center, actually, a harm reduction drop-in center serving young people that I encountered the social work and social services world. This was somewhere where I would go every day to read the newspaper and to have coffee because during the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. when you're in the shelter system, you're not in the shelter. You're not allowed to stay there. You have to go out and make your way in the world with no money and with nothing. So I would go to this drop-in center. I'd have a nice place to go. I ended up getting a job there, first part-time and then full-time. I ended up being part of a team providing services to young people, legal supports, public health supports, just place to come and take a shower or eat some food or to get some counseling, HIV counseling, Hep C supports. And I started, even through my own experiences of like 2 years on the streets and seeing all of the things that I saw and experiencing the things I experienced, life really depends on the roll of the dice in this country. And I started wanting to fight back because when I was working at that drop-in center, for example, there were a lot of young people who wanted to go to a treatment center for drugs, but they were closing all of the treatment facilities in this country. There are a lot of young people who couldn't access certain programs because they didn't have status in Canada, like I did, for example. And this is what started to radicalize me. And I had always been interested in writing. And it was not until my late 20s that I first published something because I was very concerned about the issue of police officers coming into the schools in Toronto. And I wrote a piece about it on my own personal blog, which a small online publication called Torontoist saw. They contacted me and they said, "We want to republish this. Can we reprint your work?" And I was like, "Really? You do want to do that? That's crazy." And they did. And they paid me. And I was just like, I'm doing this now. This was like what did it for me. And so I started bringing all of those experiences that I had had of wanting to speak out about different social issues to my writing. And I kept going. I've worked, I know we'll probably talk about this in a bit, but I've worked with OCASI. I worked for 2 years on a program, on a campaign to extend voting rights, municipal voting rights to permanent residents so that some non-citizens at least living here would be able to vote. And I worked a lot on immigrant issues, even though I was born here because my parents immigrated to this country and I saw the struggles that they went through. And I've been very blessed to get to connect with groups like Justicia and Migrant Workers Alliance for Change and to see the work that people like Gabriel are doing, fighting for some of the most oppressed and marginalized people. So it just was a snowball. It started off as like a personal desire to be speaking and to be heard. And then as my platform grew, trying to bring as many of these stories to my audience as possible.
Thank you. And to go off of that point, Gabriel, could you tell us when your sort of snowballing effect into the activism that you do now, how did that start off? How did you get um, involved in the advocacy work that you do? You're muted, sorry.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see my screen? Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, how did I snowball into activism? Let me go back to tell you about my working and living conditions. I came to Canada to produce food. So for many, many years, I've been in your kitchen, I've been on your dinner tables, producing your food. But the problem is a lot of Canadians, not only do they have a culture of silence, but they are blind, they don't see us, they don't hear us. So I came to Canada to produce food. But where where did I come from? I I'm from the global south, and from this map there you can see St. Lucia is a very, very, very small island. And the size is so small, any Canadian would feel they have enough money to buy. It's so small. We're just a dot. We're just a dot. And from the map there, you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is Florida. So here would be Central and South America. So basically, we're between Florida and South America. Lots of islands. Some of these islands are French, some are Dutch, and so on. Let me talk a little bit about before colonization. Before colonization, a lot of these islands and countries we were inhabited by indigenous peoples. After that, we were after that. We have the colonizers coming in, and my country was colonized by France and by England. And those islands in the Caribbean, some were colonized by Spanish country and by Spain, like Cuba. Some by England, some by France, some by Holland. So basically, all of those languages, they're European languages, we are colonized. But were we just colonized? During colonization, we saw people being brought to the Caribbean as from Africa to work on the plantation as slaves. So during colonization, not only were they dominating, but they really exploited labor. After that, what do we see after that? We saw after colonization, or during that time, there was a lot of fight for emancipation. And in the British West Indies, emancipation was in 1838. And in the French West Indies, it was in 1848. And after emancipation, we have people being brought in from Asia to work as indentured workers. So for me, if you were to cut me in half, one part of me is from Africa, and I might have some blood of Desmond in me because a lot of people were brought in from Africa to work in the Caribbean. So on one side, if you cut me in half, one side of me would be on my mother's side, who was exploited as, slaves. The other part of me is from my father's side, people from Asia being brought to the Caribbean and exploited as indentured workers. And and me, myself, I'm coming to Canada to be exploited as a migrant worker. But what really forced me to come to Canada, if you look at this table here, what forced me to come to Canada? And again, there's not enough time to talk about these things, but I would encourage people to read about neoliberal policies. Because of neoliberal policies, I was forced to come to Canada. Neoliberal policies. And because of neoliberal policies, unemployment is very high in our country. Because unemployment is high in our country, we rely a lot on remittances. I want you to read about it and look at that. That's a new word I came across. Flex security. It's a new word that they coined. What is it? To be in a country where unemployment is high, or to come to Canada where you face difficult working and living conditions. Let us talk a little bit about the difficult working and living conditions. Okay, the program that brought me to Canada, it's called the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program. This program is getting workers from Mexico and the Caribbean. We come here for a maximum of 8 months, and by the 15th of December, we have to go home. Um, other workers are coming on this program, agriculture stream and low wage stream. These workers are coming from all countries. It's not a case where workers from any country can apply to come to Canada, but it's a case where the employers in Canada can get workers from all countries. And these workers under these two programs, they can come to Canada for a maximum of 24 months or 2 years. But whether you come, regardless of which program you come under, you are tied to a specific employer. You can only work for one employer. We call it a tied work permit. And that contract, as you can see, it is not forever. It is for a period of time. And just quickly here, this table here is showing migrant workers in the different provinces, basically across Canada. And in Ontario, I'll just use Ontario since or I guess most of us are in Ontario. You can see in the light blue is 2015, and the deeper color is 2022 figures. You can see it's a lot of workers. And I want to tell it to you in a way that you'll never forget. DET, DET. I discovered that in Canada, another name for migrant worker in Canada is DET. What is DET? Denied, excluded, untied. A migrant worker in Canada is denied, excluded, and tied. We'll look at that in a short while. People from Europe, Canada is saying people from Europe are DDT. People from Europe are DDT. Canada is saying to people from Europe, we will not deny you freedom. We will not deny your rights. We will not tie you to your employer. But migrant workers are denied, excluded, and tied. And here are some of this. Let me take denied. Look at that. In Canada, and that's enshrined in Canadian law, we are denied. Another name for migrant worker in Canada is denied. We are denied the right to vote. We are denied the right to participate in culture and community. Denied the right to be protected by ordinary labor standards. So another name for migrant worker in Canada is denied. And that's enshrined in Canadian law. Does that make us a human being? And we all know in Ontario, sometime this month, very soon will be a holiday, family day. Your best days in Canada are migrant workers' worst days in Canada. Will you be a spectator and watch, or will you be a fight and fight? So that is denied. Look at excluded. In Ontario, in Ontario, let's just look at Ontario. And we exclude from a lot of things. Look at in Ontario, overtime pay, we excluded from that. Minimum wage excluded. Hours of work excluded. Daily rest period excluded. Weekly rest periods excluded. Public holidays excluded. Vacation with pay excluded. Collective bargaining or unionization we excluded. What's another name for migrant worker in Canada? Excluded. And I said tied, we are of a tied work permit. So all of these things, you can see very clearly that because of my difficult work and a difficult living condition, I was forced to speak up.
Thank you, Gabriel, for that context. And I'll ask Desmond as well in terms of the actual, in this project of Journeys to Active Citizenship, we seek to promote community engagement, which you both have done throughout your work. However, you both have also spoken to the risks of doing particular kinds of community engagement or civic engagement or active citizenship. So what are those risks that you've encountered? People have been penalized, for example, for protesting. People have been criminalized for different forms of active citizenship. People have been penalized professionally, socially, based on the community engagement that they take up. And I know, Gabriel, you can also speak to how migrant workers have been penalized for speaking out against unjust conditions within their work environments. So Desmond, could you speak to that first? And then Gabriel, if you don't mind to stop sharing your screen, unless there's more you'd like to talk to on your slides.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Tanya. Just to quickly reflect on something that Gabriel said on the opening about silencing, because I think it relates to your question. Like he said, culture of silence. And we do have a culture of silence, and I would extend culture of silencing in Canada, because silence is not just something that happens on its own as some kind of accident. It's an active thing. So it's like when I was writing for the Toronto Star, for example, I remember the first time I tried to use the term white supremacy in a news article, in a column. My editor tried to take out that language without telling me. And he sent me back the copy, and that term was not there anymore. And there was no explanation for why it had been taken out. He just it made him feel uncomfortable. And I asked him to put it right back in because it was there for a reason, right? And so these are some of the ways that we are actively silencing people. We're choosing what kinds of stories are allowed to be in the public sphere. We are absolutely punishing people, right, for deciding to speak out about certain things. I definitely experienced that as a writer at the Toronto Star. I was told that for some reason, I'm not allowed to be an activist and a journalist at the same time. This is the newspaper that employed Naomi Klein, Craig and Mark Kielberger, Catherine Porter. You know, they were all okay as white people to do their columns, which are opinion columns. We are actually there to give our opinion. I'm not there to do a straight news reporting. But for me, somehow, it was like as soon as I was doing activism on my own time, activism against the police, I would add, then it was like, no, I was pulled into the office and I was disciplined. And I was told you're breaking the rules of this newspaper, even though that's not true. Um, I've seen students in our schools be disciplined just for talking about the countries that they come from and wanting, for example, in this moment, Palestinian students trying to talk about their homeland being destroyed in Gaza and in the West Bank and people being persecuted, people being killed by the Israeli government. Students are disciplined at school just for talking about these kinds of things, children. We see people in the workplace who, if they want to organize, unionize, if they want to talk about certain issues of racial discrimination that are happening on the job, they are disciplined. So it's a reality with, and what I would say is that it is going to be part of the process and a part of the danger for all of us. There's no safety, absolute safety in doing this kind of work. However, there is strength in numbers, there is strength in community, and there's strength in educating ourselves and building coalitions, because it is much harder for the people who want to silence and who want to discipline us when we have backup, when we have people in our corner, when we've done enough research to present things and say, look, like these are the facts of the things that we're talking about. These are our own company policies or our own documents. Why aren't you living up to the standards that you yourself are setting? When I was at the Toronto Star, they talked about Atkinson principles. They talked about that newspaper being found by union activists, but somehow a Black person is not allowed to be an activist when you have this whole set of principles on your website saying it's our work. So you have to hold people accountable to the kind of standard that they claim they operate under. And you have to move in teams. You have to move in groups. You have to reach out, is the final thing I'll say too. When somebody is disciplined, when someone is threatened at work, when a child is suspended from school for speaking up, when the police come to our demonstrations and try to criminalize people or take them under arrest, we have to make sure that we don't leave people behind, that when they get targeted, we are immediately there to care for them, to support them, and to bring them back in so that if they want to continue doing this work, they're able to do that. We can't leave anybody behind.
Thank you. And Gabriel, can you speak to that same point of being penalized or what kinds of consequences you have seen or experienced based on your activism and community engagement, but also to that last point that Desmond spoke about, the importance of community building and sort of that community of practice and protecting each other. And I know that you have engaged in work like that as well with Justicia and with temporary foreign workers. So if you could speak to those 2 points as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I like to say it this way. My voice, your voice, our voice, that's the voice for the workers. Because in Canada, they don't have a voice. And somebody who's denied, and that's enshrined in Canadian law, denied basic human right, excluded from basic labor protection, and tied to the employer. The employer controls every aspect of your life, every aspect of your life. The employer controls the travel agency that's booking your flight in and out of your country. The employer can terminate your contract without cause. Do you have a voice? Do you have a voice? Culture, imagine, as I said, Canada has a culture of silence. And the way the program is designed to force you to be silent. And that is why on the outside world, in my home country, no news is good news. We keep thinking, oh, it must be great in Canada. It must be great because you don't have a problem. But because of unjust laws, they don't have a voice. So that is why my voice is pretty loud. And I'm hoping that the audience too will be pretty loud because it's our voice. You know what the politicians love to tell me? That's not an issue in their writing. That is not an issue in their writing. Nobody's calling them up. Is that great news for them? They're not under pressure. So the question is, the food that you're eating is being produced by people who are not treated well. The food that you're eating is being produced by people who are not treated. Do you have confidence in a system where the workers are not treated well? Or isn't that peace of mind? Isn't that food security, knowing that the people who are producing your food are treated well? And that is where your voice comes in. Are you concerned whether your food is being grown by those who respect the soil, respect the environment, respect the workers? Or you're not concerned whether they exploit the soil, exploit the environment, are you concerned? And that is where collective work comes in. And that is where we need to work together. Because in the opening poem, I want to tell you, S in the program that brought me to Canada, it starts with S. The S stands for seasonal. The programs that bring in workers starts with T, temporary. They say we are temporary. They say we are seasonal. But look at that. The government that is in office right now, when they first came into office, you know what they said? On what platform? Real change. I was dancing because I wanted real change, real change. But when they got into office, what sound they started singing to you? The new reality. And what's the new reality? Short-term employment, contracts, flexible. That is what, and these are things that they've tried on us. So what I'm telling you is our issues are related to your issues. We are connected by food, but we're also connected by our working conditions. That's important. And collective action, that is what will bring change. Because our issues, our difficult issues are being brought into mainstream employment. And there's a connection, there's a strong connection. And I want you to pay attention to that. And now another important thing is, I want to bring that up. The more urbanized we become, the more we move to the cities, the more we become disconnected from the land. I personally believe that the food that we eat can be the safest form of our medicine. They say if we eat well, it's like food is our medicine. But if we don't eat well, then medicine will be our food. Are you concerned? So the question is, if the more urbanized we are, generally the less attention we pay to our food. But equally important, he who controls the land controls food. And who controls your food controls you. Are you concerned? Are you concerned? And that is where we need to work together to make sure that there's some element of equality and justice in our society. Because the politicians love to say Canada is the most diverse, the most multicultural, the most this, the most that. That's true. But in truth and in fact, are we all treated equally and fairly? And will you be quiet? And what is the great speakers in the world, what they've said? Our silence never helps the tormented, it helps the tormentor. Our silence is basically saying the system is good as it is. The system, everything is okay as it. Our silence. So we need to wake up and work together to create a fair system, a just system. I am loud. You know why I'm loud? Because I want a Canadian food system that is healthy, that is sustainable, and that is just. And me alone with my big mouth, I can only do that much. But collectively, we can work together and create a fair system, a just system. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I just also want to go back to something you said specifically within the seasonal agricultural work program and the reality of workers being tied to their employers. Um, that's a dynamic that creates or encourages silence itself, right? Because being penalized by your employer could result in being ejected from the program, right? And there are bureaucratic measures that are set and presented as being there to protect workers when on the ground lived realities do not reflect that, right? And I would ask Desmond also if you could speak to sort of confronting larger systems, bureaucratic systems, and or specifically police brutality or police forces, and sort of the image of protection, the image of we're here to serve, and the lived realities of criminalized individuals themselves.
Well, here maybe I would use an example that relates to temporary workers in this country, which is a case that I learned about through their advocacy many years ago, where the police said that they were looking for a suspect in a sexual assault case in Southern Ontario, and they had a description of that person. And what they decided to do was go to several places where they know that migrant workers are working and living and demanding DNA samples from them. And they took DNA samples from literally dozens of mostly Black men. And when you have a description of somebody who has allegedly done something, it's a pretty strict kind of interpretation of who it is we're looking for. But there were men who were this tall who were getting who were getting scrutinized and profiled by the police. There were men who were a foot taller than them who were getting profiled, and the police were demanding all these men give DNA samples. Now imagine you're here temporarily, as we keep being reminded by Gabriel, you're here in a precarious situation. You are tied to an employer. You're scared about reporting any kinds of abuses in your area because this could cost you your livelihood. You could make you be sent home. How are you going to deal with the police demand to give your biological information? What happens if you say no, even though presumably under the laws of this country, you have the right to say no? What happens when you actually exercise that right? What are they going to do to you? And it's because of the resistance of these many workers who this happened to. They took the police in the area to the Human Rights Tribunal, and it took like almost a decade, I believe, but they were exonerated. And the police still tried to fight afterwards, by the way, to keep the DNA evidence that they had collected from all of these people. Disgusting. Policing is violence. We talk about police brutality, and sometimes I think to myself, like, I think about what Christina Sharp once said, which is like, we don't even have to say police violence or police brutality. It's implied policing. It's an institution of coercion and force. And it's very scary when, Gabriel talks about what they don't tell you in this country. Well, I think one of the things that people come to this country not knowing is how long the history of policing Black life and Indigenous life is in Canada. It's not new. It's not something that we saw happening in America, in the United States of America, and said, well, why don't we try that also? I'll give you a very quick example. The Northwestern Mounted Police were created in large part to control the movement of Indigenous people in land that the government of Canada wanted for itself. So the Northwestern Mounted Police, now the RCMP, that was their mission. They created a pass system for people. The government forced Indigenous people into plots of land that they decided were where they should live. Those were not the traditional territories of a lot of those people. And then they said, you can't leave. And if you try to leave, you have to have a pass that we give you. And you have to show it to the Indian agent or to the Northwestern Mounted Police. And if we catch you anywhere on these territories without that pass, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be arrested. You're going to be jailed, all kinds of things. Some people might know that we celebrate something, or we commemorate, I should say, something called the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in this country, March 21st. We commemorate that day because there was a massacre in a place called Sharpeville in South Africa in 1960, where dozens of Black people were killed for protesting a pass law system in that country, where Black people also had to show a pass to the in order to be able to move freely in South Africa. Guess where South Africa got the pass law system from, everybody? They got it from Canada. So this idea that we just look to America and we copy their racism, or that it seeps up here from down across the border, and we're still saying that today with Trump, by the way. Everyone wants to talk about the big orange madman down there, as if he's inspiring hatred and racism that has always been in this country. As if we didn't have 200 years of Black people being enslaved in this country, right? Understanding the origins of policing helps you understand what's going on today. Understanding that when Black people came from the United States seeking freedom in places like Birchtown, Nova Scotia, and then there were race riots and there were people burning down the towns that they lived in, but there were also laws. I'll just tell you really quickly. The first chapter is called Negro Frolics. My name on Twitter for many years has been Negro Frolics. That comes from a law in the 1780s, I believe, in Nova Scotia, a law that forbade what they called Negro Frolics, which meant people who are Black getting together to drink, to dance, to gamble, to associate with each other really in any way. No groups of Black people in this area, please. No Negro frolicking. 1780s Canada. So who's going to enforce those rules? The police are going to enforce those rules. The state authorities are going to come around and make sure that people are not doing those things. And if they catch you, there's going to be whippings and beatings and jailings. And in some cases, as a Black person, you're going to be executed. So when the police follow me down the street today, no, it's not because they were watching television or because Trump is in the office. It's because we've been doing this thing with the police for hundreds of years on these territories. And Black people have been fighting back against those things for just as long.
I think the connections you both made about the sort of policing and regulating of bodies, the movement of bodies, specifically Black bodies, is important to highlight. And because, I'm coming from this, from OCASI and the settlement sector, and I'm mindful of the time, I just want to know from you both, especially in regards to, again, confronting or working within sort of bureaucratic systems, how do we in the settlement agency support activists who are doing on the ground work that is often criminalized or is dangerous when there is a sort of safeguard that we surround ourselves in terms of needing to access funding, for example. We rely on the state to then provide our services that often are used by the very people you work with on the ground in your advocacy and activist work. So how do we manage and navigate these dynamics and relations? I can start with you, Gabriel, and then we'll go to you, Desmond, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's a powerful question. Can I go home and study a little bit to get your answer, or can I check ChatGPT to for the answer? Yeah, that's a powerful question. Um, we personally believe, and that's okay, the group that I'm with, Justice for Migrant Workers, but that's our philosophy. Who controls your funding controls your agenda. So, and in Canada, that is powerful, powerful. Who are the people with the money, the power, the influence, and who are they are the ones financing the thing, a lot of the projects, and they are the ones who control the agenda. How do you work within those confines? One, I don't know. There's no clear-cut answer, but one, it boils down to how much do you, where do you stand? Where do you stand as a person? Awareness, awareness, awareness. And we are in the age of information, they say we are in the age of information. There's so much or too much information, but there's a lot of misinformation also. Why do we have this session today? Because you're getting it from the horse's mouth. All of that information we're talking, you can get it elsewhere, but it can be watered down or sugar coated. Getting it from the horse's mouth, that is important. So one thing you can do at a personal level is to educate yourself, and get it from the horse's mouth. Because when you look at mainstream media, it's always watered down, sugar coated, or whatever, right? So that is important. Education awareness is important. That is one at an individual level. Number two, you can educate your family. There are lots of resources, documentaries, books that you can share with your family. You can educate the people that you're working with. I'm also working within that confines. I'm also working with a settlement organization that's funded by the government. I go to the workers, but I educate the workers. Within and at a personal level, I do that. I educate the workers. I try to empower, inspire people. These are little things that you can do to keep the movement growing. Educating people, inspiring people. These are important things at an individual level. At the organizational level, you can raise the challenges that you face. I'm serving these people, but they're weakened by this, by that, by that, and you can raise that. You can be a recording. Like you can repeat the same things over and over. You can repeat it over and over. They will not listen to you, but you can become a recorder. Repeating that becomes, they can identify that with you, associate that with you, become a voice. That is some of the things I can think of right now. But to be honest, being a migrant worker, being something bodies black, all the cards are stacked against us. It's not easy. All the cards are stacked against us. And how do we fight back? It takes time. But I personally, you can do that little, but if you do it repeatedly, consistently, with time, it will build a movement and create more awareness. And as I said, how we can change things if we don't talk about it. And talking about it, I'm pretty sure we've moved the dial a little. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gabriel. Like I would say it is about having the courage go right up to the line of what is permitted under the rules and under the obligations of funding and all those kinds of things about advocacy, going right up to the limit and to the line. And something that I really from Black people in this country is that the line is actually a lot further than a lot of people will tell us that it is. There are a lot of institutions that, as a kind of culture, say you have to be careful about everything you say, everything you do. And what that does is it actually completely narrows and limits the scope of what they're willing to explore before they even get out of the gate. I will never forget when the Harper government was taking away the federal interim health program from newcomers who didn't qualify for healthcare in Canada and who were relying on this interim program to get access to some forms of healthcare. And the Harper government was trying to take that away. Angela Robertson, who's been working in the community healthcare sector for many decades, she went we were all, hundreds of us gathered at an immigration office on St. Clair Avenue. And she gave this speech and she named the minister at the time, Jason Kenney, who was responsible for this program. She said his name. She talked about the consequences of what was going to happen if this program was taken away from immigrants. And I remember standing there thinking, she's going to lose her job. You can't say this. But not only did she not lose her job, she continued to be an incredibly effective and respected advocate. And the news agencies, for example, they don't necessarily always want to come to Justicia, for example, but they might want to come to a registered group like OCASI and say, tell us what's going on, right? So like being forceful in the advocacy is really important. But I also echo what Gabriel said, like, what about bringing in people who are doing the work on the ground, paying them and allowing them to speak directly to your membership about the work they're doing and the importance of being involved? That is still okay. That is an important thing that needs to be done. It's about being creative. we all understand that people have obligations and responsibilities. Me as a journalist, I have ethics that I also have to follow. But like I said, I have realized that people in my profession are much more likely to create a phony sense of restrictions just out of fear and go beyond what is even allowed or not allowed to just, I want to stay in my little protective bubble. I don't want any bad attention. I don't want anybody to be focused on what I am saying. That is a dereliction of your responsibilities. It's harmful to people who really actually are fighting out here. So that's what I would say, is just to be creative and to find out what the line is and then walk right up to that line as close as you can get. Because at the end of it, if you're able as an organization to keep your funding, but all of the people in the sector who are actually affected by this day to day can't live, what is the point of your advocacy? What is the point of what you're doing? I have been willing many times in the work that I do to be disciplined and even to lose my job. I'm a single person. I don't have any children. I don't have the same responsibilities as somebody else. That's why I go very hard, by the way, because I understand what it means to be thinking, oh, I have to pay a mortgage. I have to take care of my children. I know not everybody is in the same place, but collectively, it can't always be the excuse that I have to look out for myself, that I have to look out for my family. If you get to live a good life while the people you supposedly advocate for do not, I don't know what we're doing out here. Courage is essential. Walking right up to the line and pressing as hard as you can is essential.
Thank you for that. I think it's very powerful way to sort of end this conversation, but I want to provide you both a chance to make any final comments and or if there is a question from the audience. I see a comment in the chat referring to how, like, specifically, how do we push back against anti-immigrant and racist sentiments online, especially when social media platforms are almost encouraging it. I think you're both, I think, as you noted, requires creativity and ongoing work. Gabriel, I noticed you put up a slide on the screen. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for those questions. I don't know. Having sessions like that, I don't know why the time moves so fast. How can we slow down time? How can we slow down the clock? I don't know why it's moving so fast. Yeah. Yeah, on the screen I'm sharing here, there's some QR codes, and these are some things that are happening that you can do. If you really want action to create a better society, here are some things. Amnesty International is putting up a petition asking for an open work permit. Instead of a worker being tied to an employer, that the workers should have an open work permit. And these are things that people from Europe got when they got here. It's not anything new that we're asking Canada to do. We also have a newsletter where we share news about what's happening in the migrant justice world. You can subscribe to it. We'll be also doing consultation. What happened is that's exciting news for me. We are fighting with the government in the court, and we're asking the court to make it illegal for the closed work permit, which is kind of similar to what Desmond said. Indigenous people, they were pushed to a plot of land and they cannot leave. Like they were enclosed there. For you to leave, you need a pass. It's just like you come to my home and I tell you my home is your home, but yet still I'm closing the door. I tell you not to go outside. Where's the freedom? Where's the rights? Where's the freedom that you have? Canada in 1982 signed on to the Charter of Rights and Freedom. A culture of rights and freedom. On the world stage, that's how Canada portrays itself, the most loving country. But yet still, a lot of people are denied those rights, those freedom. So we're taking the government to court about the closed work permit, asking the court to knock down the closed work permit. But the court will not tell the government to put in something better. So to put something better, we are doing some consultation to replace the closed work permit and then try to get a politician to put in a bill to put something better. So we have two fights happening at the same time. One is in the court and two is in parliament. But to get the bill in place, we have been doing consultation and you can participate in that. You're invited to participate, I can share my number. But here again, the QR codes will take you to the newsletter, which will keep you connected. But there are lots of things happening, and there are lots of things you can do. At the end of the day, you know what it boils down to? Your hands. There's power in your hands. There is power in your hands. Are you aware of the power that you have? You notice by now I have a big mouth or a long mouth. Not everybody have a big mouth or a long mouth, but there's something that you can do. You have a skill. Desmond is using his skill as a journalist and other things. You have a skill, you have a talent. The question is, what is your skill? What is your talent? And how can you use it to create a better world? Desmond told you a while ago, South Africa, Canada is not just a country. Canada is a standard. People look up to Canada. People look up to Canada. South Africa looked up to Canada. The world is looking up to Canada. But your silence is on whose side? Is it helping the tormented or is it helping the tormentor? There's power in your hands. How can you use your power to create a better society? And that's what it's boiling down to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to end it reading the comment in the chat from Catherine that says, this has been really inspiring to keep pushing forward. Thank you for helping us connect the present moment to the past and helping us think about how these lessons apply. I think that's a great way to, sorry, Desmond, I noticed you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add a final remark? Or
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you so much to Gabriel. It's been a real great pleasure to be on this panel with you. I shared a link to your book online, and I really encourage everybody to try and get a copy of Harvesting Freedom and to support Gabriel's work. So I guess like the last thing I wanted to say, if we can we take down this share screen, Gabriel?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
No,
Sorry.
it's okay. Just want to be able to see you guys. It's just that I've been following and trying to be involved in the push right now for status for all and for regularization in this country. And I've been seeing the incredible work that organizers across Canada are doing. And in not just the status for all area, but in a lot of areas of justice and liberation struggle right now, people are scared because of the fear of the government changing in the future and of the future government not being anywhere near sympathetic to our causes and to the things that we're struggling for. And what I want to say to that is, we watched Justin Trudeau promise in 2021 that he was going to bring a regularization program. And now we are living in a time where it is becoming more fashionable to blame immigrants for every problem in this country, for housing problems that have existed for decades, for employment issues, when people like Gabriel are doing the hardest work in this country. Like, we have just decided to scapegoat people and to say that it is their fault, whatever the problems are, much like Trump, again, in the United States. We don't even need those examples when we have so many of them here. The reason we haven't broken through yet, I think, is that our movements are still not big enough and they're still not loud enough. And we have to, no matter who is in office, continue building and growing our movements, because at the point where we are loud enough and forceful enough, it's not actually going to matter who's in government anymore. It's not going to matter because they fear the will of popular power, popular advocacy. We change narratives when we are strong and powerful. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement didn't achieve all of its goals in the time when it was at its height, but it changed the way we talk about the police forever. It educated so many people about policing in a way that was not happening before. Those things can never be undone. When we bring people into the status for all fight and we educate people, it changes the way they move around in the world. It changes how they talk to their neighbors. It changes when they hear something ignorant at work to speak up against it and be like, actually, that's not the case. So we're not simply building for political outcome, yes, or political outcome, no. We're trying to build movements that can actually change the course of our lives in this country. That work does not stop no matter who is in office. And at the time that we do build sufficient power, it won't matter who's there. We're going to get the changes that we need. So that's how I want to end.
Can I add a 2 cents to that? Thank you. That's powerful stuff. The average person knows about Canada's role in the Underground Railroad system. Even the unborn child knows about it. That is selected education. But the very injustices that are happening right now, nobody knows about it. And another important thing, Desmond said education. I want to tell you, for example, let me take Desmond and I. I know a few things about Desmond. Do I know Desmond? No. Now, there's a difference between knowing about something and knowing something, knowing the thing. There's a difference between knowing about something and knowing. When you know something, it's different to knowing about it. I know a few things about Desmond, but if I really know Desmond, my education has changed, my position has changed. And why am I telling you that? A lot of the things, whose stories are we hearing? Whose stories? They say, not until the lion learns to write. Every storybook glorifies the hunter. And that is the Canadian system. Everything is whitewash. Get your information from the horse's mouth, because when you know the real story, your whole situation, your position will change. And that is what I'm hoping this session will do. And as I said, there's power in your hands. Discover that power. You must have a skill. And the moment you use that skill, a better Canada is possible. Because all of those things are unjust laws, unjust policy. These are not natural laws. These are man-made stuff, and that can be changed. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. This has been really powerful and I think igniting a lot of excitement in our audience, certainly in me. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And just as I've noted throughout the day, these sessions are recorded and will be posted for people to view at a later time. Gabriel, if you don't mind sending me your slides, I can include that to send to registrants as well, or Desmond, any material you'd like me to share, including promotion of both of your writings.
I want Gabriel's slides too.
Yeah, thank you. Education is a continuous process, and I'm really happy that we've invested our time in that, and I'm really thankful and grateful for that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring